Right. Okay.
Hello,
Okay.
everybody. Hello,
Cool.
everybody again. In my last video, which seems to be getting some attention, all right? That's okay. I wasn't expecting that video to get much attention in the first place, so all is good. Here we have a friend from Australia who also has a similar experience to myself regarding feelings of euthanasia, aka assisted suicide. He is a friend from Queensland. And he also has had a similar experience regarding parental or family figures dying when they could have had euthanasia be the cause of a better death for our family. So,
Okay.
so please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Sam Bullock, and I want to talk about the experience of my grandfather Harry and how he ended up getting dementia and the consequences it had for him and his family, and seeing, his deterioration.
And at what age did that start to happen in terms of the deterioration? Was it when you were young, or was
Well,
it?
I was probably in my life, about 15 or 16 at the time. And then it was probably when I was about 23 when he passed away. So 2003. So it was sort of onset dementia, which lasted for quite a long time and as he rapidly deteriorated.
And if you don't mind saying, was it a peaceful or aggressive death?
Well, it was a pretty peaceful death. He went kind of without, eventually he just didn't know who he was. And I guess he just lost all memory and didn't know who anyone was. So but it was terrible seeing him deteriorate like that. I should have put him out of his misery when he was like that, because it was just like looking in the eyes of a total stranger.
And regarding the bill, regarding the bill which is being posted for next week, how do you feel about the euthanasia bill being actively proposed by the alliance of organizations?
Well, I totally support it. I think that dignity in death is something that people should have, the same as they have dignity in life. My granddad was a dignified working class man. He drove trucks for asbestos companies. He was a bus driver in Sydney. He used to drive Coca-Cola trucks. He was a long-distance truck driver. He used to spray bananas and got covered in DDT. He would work in all these jobs to bring my father up and have a good life. So my father had to see his dad pass away from this disease when they could have easily just given him a shot and just
Okay,
put
I'll talk
him
about
out of
my,
his misery. He wouldn't have known anyway. He was too
enough
far
now.
gone.
Enough now for a second. I'll talk about a bit
Okay.
about mine now. I am 24 now. That's fine saying, at least. It's for context of the story. Uh, when I was young, I went back to the UK to look after my grandparent, which was Grandpa. He was in Bomber Command in World War II. He was a squadron leader. He served in multiple countries, including Singapore.
Yeah.
Of what I know of his later life, he had haunted dreams, sometimes locked himself up in rooms, and in a way, him getting dementia was good in its own way, but it still started the massive decline of his memories, which slowly eroded even knowing who his children or wife was. The reason why I say it's good, because he had survivor's guilt, essentially, of many times surviving air bomber missions, where there was multiple times where he was the only survivor in some cases of bombing raids where he had lost many friends in war fighting against the
Yeah.
Nazis.
Yeah. Well, that's terrible. I mean, when you see the ideology of this sort of thing. You look at the people who are opposing this bill. I mean, well, what? So you would actually not even give someone who served their country the right to a dignified death, so they didn't get shot to shit on a foreign battlefield and die, so they can die in a nursing home somewhere in agony somewhere.
The nursing home stuff was fine, to the most part. The first place he went to actually was a regular nursing home. At first, we didn't go to a nursing home because we as a family could manage him. Because there was me, my brothers, my mum, and grandma there to act as a support base. As his dementia got worse, it meant that he couldn't really stay at home so much because he was failing more and more at basic functions.
So he'd leave the gas on the stove and nearly set the house on fire. And
no. He was banned from cooking or doing anything like that with dementia. None of my family was stupid enough to let someone with dementia cook or do anything like that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that he couldn't stay at home because he would forget things like that.
Of course. If he was to cook in his dementia state at home, of course he could potentially burn a place down very easily. That is very true. But he was forbidden from cooking or doing anything serious, of course, because he had dementia.
Of course, yeah. He couldn't remember if he'd eaten anyway because he couldn't remember anything.
And there was to the point of where for example, books. He had books where he read the first page, forgot what was on the first page, then kept reading the first page in an eternal loop. It was so essentially it was very easy to be entertained to add some humor to this.
You could actually see the humorous side of that one, really. My granddad used to do the same thing. He used to walk outside. He used to go outside and he used to go next door and think it was a bank and try to get money out because all the bars were on the windows.
Interesting. And what ultimately, one thing to clarify is that we aren't saying, at least not me right now, you can say what you want in a minute, that euthanasia should be used as a weapon to take down cripples. No, not at all. In these cases, in both our cases, we had family members who was losing all cognitive functions, even memory. Because ultimately, when you lose the memory of your own wife, your own daughters, and your own family, that is a sign of rapid degradation, is it not?
Yes.
And then you can argue, what then is the best humane action with someone physically losing their memories, losing their personality, losing everything that makes them them?
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add to this, Sam?
Yeah, I like to point about when you see them losing their cognitive abilities. It was at one point when it was about 23 and I saw him for the last time. It was in that retirement home when he was in Nelson's Bay in New South Wales. It was like looking at a stranger. I shared a cigar with him, but he didn't remember who I was. And he'd been buying cigarettes on a credit card that he'd been using, which had been weird because he never smoked before. But oh well, when he was on the way out and he was that far gone, who cares anyway, really?
Very true.
So I mean, at that point, we were all. When you see someone they're not the person they were, they're just an empty shell of who they were, and they're just like. There's the body of the person, but that person is dead, pretty much dead before they'd physically die. They're already dead. You know what I mean?
And also, let's also in this extension, let's extend this to people with terminal illness, because most people who actually would get euthanasia, realistically, would be those who have terminal illnesses like extreme cancers or people who are about to die anyway, right? Due to some imbalances. Of course, because of course, what we're saying is anecdotal about family who essentially could not have a death, remembering all they've done in life. Ultimately, they died in both our cases, not knowing much of themselves, not knowing much of others around them, not remembering what they did in life. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, that is correct to say. Like he couldn't remember being a bus driver. He couldn't remember his sons. He couldn't remember his wife. He couldn't remember anything. He couldn't even remember what he had for breakfast the next day.
Let's go into this. Okay, let's move on now. In your opinion, what do you think is a rational policy on euthanasia that can be applied, that can be humanitarian?
Well, I think the most rational one would be if they have no ability to consent, say if they have long-term dementia, if they have suffered strokes or they have suffered some irreversible, illness, which there is no way to reverse it, and they can't consent due to lack of cognitive skills, then they need someone from their immediate to make the decision.
But ultimately, in that case, wouldn't that then require, at least, would you agree, at least 2 or 3 doctors signing off on that, at least, to show that they can no longer function?
Well, I mean, you only need 1 or 2 doctors to
True.
sign off on it, because essentially they've been treating the person for long onset dementia, or they have motor neuron disease or dementia or permanent disability, or which will inevitably result in their death anyway. So they already have a terminal diagnosis.
And anyway, regarding the role of family, what do you think the role of family is in this dynamic of death and life and suicide and assisted suicide?
Well, I think the family should be the ones who mostly will suffer, not just the person who's sick are the family, because when they have to look and see, the one they loved and nurse them and see them, when they used to be out there and confident, and see them become pretty much a vegetable where they can't feed themselves or eat or even remember who their wife's name is, their kids' names are, and watch them, deteriorate to the level from being a confident, healthy person to a complete vegetable. They would just want it to be over as quick as possible and just put the person out of their misery, because, it's horrible on the person who's got dementia, and it's also terrible for the people who have to see this and, watch this dignified person they love deteriorate to a level of a vegetable.
Ultimately, regarding what you said there, Sam, that's sentiment I can agree with, because at the time of Grandpa's death, I felt both sad and also relieved, because he was really degrading and he was stuck on a bed at that point. For example, before he was walking at 80 still, perfectly fine, and then the dementia degraded so badly that he stopped walking at all, anywhere. So in his case, I'd say that it's sad, really, the fate that can happen. And you're right, the family is the one most affected by it, as we are the ones who have cognitive function, the cognitive ability to remember everything, to remember their memories, to remember their legacies. And we have to then live up to and defend their legacies without them even remembering what it is themselves.
Yeah.
So ultimately, then, in this case, what do you think more should be done in Australia? Let's say if I was up in Queensland, since I live in Queensland, regarding assisted suicide.
Well, they've already passed legislation legalising euthanasia in Queensland.
Yes, I know it's passed already. Do you think it's enough, or do you think it should be extended in certain parts?
I think that it does need to maybe be reviewed, to be updated, to look at other things. But I do think as the bill passed, it had to get through. So I did have to make those changes so they could get it passed. So as it stands now, it's fantastic. It actually means that people can make decisions. They have a doctor's decision to pretty much, as you said, hit the kill switch and just give them enough morphine to, knock them off their perch and just die in their sleep.
Because also, as I said, there already exists a practice in the aged care facilities, which is essentially slow death already. So how
Yeah,
would
I know.
as you both know, of course. So ultimately, what then is the difference in this situation between a slow death where you have liquids injected into you slowly to poison you, which is what that process is. You in a place, you get less and less
Yeah.
food over time. It's a pre-programmed way to die chemically,
Hmm.
as we all know. So ultimately, then, what then is the difference in this case between euthanasia, aka a single shot of one chemical, and the prolonged withdrawing of food and injection of lethal chemicals?
One's a more humane and humanitarian way to die, and the other one's essentially just trying to go and dangle whatever's life's left in them, and it's just a worthless waste of just dragging things out when they're never going to meet their end.
Because I remember watching a documentary from Switzerland. I think it was aired a few.
Dr. Jack Kevorkian.
It was aired a few years ago. It was I can't remember. No, it wasn't Richard Dawkins or someone else. I've got a name, but it was someone who was like around 80 or 90 who actually was perfectly cognitive and he had a serious illness. And he chose himself to just
I saw that, yeah, in Switzerland.
that one, yes,
No,
that's that one. Yes, now I understand. Now I'm saying
Jack
thing.
Kevorkian, Dr. Jeff.
That's one we're talking about here. Yes,
Yeah.
that I think is a good example for this. I can't.
I'd like to add, they did actually pass a bill in the Northern Territory that legalised euthanasia for a small period, but it got shot down.
Who by? I actually don't know that much.
Conservative government.
Typical. And ultimately, what then do you say regarding opposition to euthanasia? What do you say? What do you say then to those who would say by committing euthanasia or by doing euthanasia, it would be an act of murder or an act which would be taking destiny out of God's hand or another person's hand?
Well, I would say that we live in a country where there's a separation of church and state, which inevitably must be upheld at all costs. And the fact that you would use Jesus Christ or say about God's mercy when somebody's dying of Alzheimer's and they have no quality of life left, when they got that diagnosis of cancer or dementia, they were already, their fate was already determined. There was nothing that could have changed it. Once you've got that diagnosis, that's it, right? So why would you want to prolong someone's life and see them live in agony and see them deteriorate, the life slowly drain out of them, and then call yourself a humanitarian Christian and talk about your humanitarian views and right to life when people had dignity in life and then they have no dignity whatsoever left in them when that's all taken from them. They're being hypocrites of the highest order.
Indeed. Because I actually remember a friend, this isn't a friend relating to any of this actually, it's relating to just dying peacefully in general. He actually died of a heart attack overnight once. I was doing DIY with him and then he actually stopped coming. I was wondering what's happening. That's his point. But either way, I spoke to his family, and I spoke to his family after because they actually found me, and because I kept going on every few days, seeing what's going on, they found me, and thankfully, he died a peaceful death. He died without feeling anything really, because the heart just stopped when he was sleeping.
Oh, that's not good.
Not good. Not good yet. Not good indeed. But at least it was not. He at least didn't feel the pain of it, did he?
Yeah.
At least it was a pain which happened, but the body.
And actually, they're also you looking about using magic mushrooms and toadstools for assisted suicide. Now they could feed someone a mixture of death cat mushrooms or something with high levels of psilocybin, and they can just go in there.
True as well. True as well. True as well. Because technically speaking, there's many combinations which can cause death in an individual, isn't there? There's a good point.
Yeah.
But ultimately, one thing to clarify is that this, though, should never be in hands of governments, for example, that's to exterminate people anyway. This sort of practice. This should only ever be for those who are in serious conditions and people who want to die with quality of life while it's still stable. Correct?
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to bring up now on your end regarding this?
And also, if they have the old, and if they are terminally ill, they have a right to say that they consent to actually be euthanized if they actually have been diagnosed and still have their cognitive ability. If they don't, I think it should not just be the doctor who makes that decision, but two or so family members as well as the security.
Very good point. Very good point. But then doesn't it come into a separate issue though? What if the family member has a grudge or conflict of interest regarding the death of the individual? What happened then?
Well, I mean, the doctor signed off and said essentially they're going to die anyway. So, I mean, and if they decide to consent to euthanasia and say, look, just get it over and done with eventually because of this, I mean, generally, I think that families generally, if they have the right to consent, if that's a wife or their wife or their next of kin, if they're still alive and able to make that decision, or their daughter or son or someone from their immediate family who is in a carer capacity to make that role, they would have to be in a carer capacity to make that role or decision. But yeah, they should be made sure that that's passed. So that is actually, but they have actually said that, that person has consented to do so, but now, unfortunately, with their diminished cognitive ability, can't go and do so because they have on-site Alzheimer's disease or fully blown dementia or motor neuron disease or Parkinson's disease or whatever else they have.
And ultimately, on this point, what limitations should be in place to make sure it's not used as a weapon or tool by others? Should it be, in your opinion?
Well, maybe a videotape will or a recording or videotape will of somebody consenting to have it done.
That sounds quite plausible, actually, because then a videotape, if then approved and signed by everyone in the room at the time, proving it is their true consensual will,
or certified by a JP.
That as well. Maybe requiring both, in fact. Maybe requiring everyone in the room signing off to that video agreement, as well as a GP signing off as the final authorization tick.
Yeah.
Because as we saw in Australia so far, ever since 2019, there's only been a few hundred euthanasias anyway. So it's not like the scale of euthanasia will be huge in the first place. It's just a means that...
Well, yeah, of course, when, generations of elderly people who would only have it done in the exception that they were suffering from a terminal illness or they had a condition which was a rapidly deteriorating condition of which there was no chance of any recovery from.
Of course. Ultimately, to run to the end of this, is there any final thoughts or any final subjects you want to raise up regarding either the bill, euthanasia, or anything we talked about?
Well, I think that the bill is interesting because when you look at the Conservatives eventually on moral grounds, but the weird thing is that they would have to consent and they would have I don't know if they passed it in New South Wales Parliament yet.
No, the hearings is next week. It's not now. Not now. But no, it's not happening yet. It's happening next week. And there's those supporting, those opposing, and it's typical one-off between
Well, I
parties.
mean,
Yeah.
I really don't. I often do think that it might even be an issue where the Conservatives alone might even cross the floor and vote on it because let's face it, I mean, they're conservative, but they're not, they're quite happy to kill off people who are on low incomes. And let's face it, this sort of thing is a great way to cut the budget off, isn't it, for the Liberals?
I suppose so in a way. I suppose so in a way that I suppose they would see as a weapon themselves and probably approve of it, knowing their logic.
And let's face it, with COVID, I mean, this sort of, logic about it, I mean, they'd probably pass it.
Good point.
When the Conservatives have been against killing people, especially when they're working class.
Anyway,
Sorry,
of course, no issue. Anything else to say on the final note?
Really. No, not really. I just want to say, yeah, thanks for helping. Thanks for having me in this video to put talk about this. Maybe we could do a few other videos like this one. What do you reckon?
Sure, we can talk between ourselves with regards to that via other social media stuff.
Sure, man. So yeah, load that up on a YouTube. This will